all this rumbling about the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade? Will abortion be illegal in the United States if Congress doesn't pass federal laws protecting the right? And who does this really benefit? These laws restricting abortion, contraceptives, and limited family planning, who are they trying to help? Well, we're talking about it after the break. Hey, brokers, I'm Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And today, y'all, we are wading into the political uproar known as the debate on abortion. I don't know if it's a debate around these parts, but everywhere else there seems to be one. So,
Not a debate amongst us, but amongst some of the other people. There
them
is quite a debate. Yeah.
facts.
And Amber, I'm kind of worried about this show is very heavy. I feel like I'm worried about what's going to happen. So, before we get into all of that, just kind of help us start off light. What you've been doing, what you've been up to.
So y'all know, I think I told y'all a couple of weeks ago, I moved to the rent house, and y'all, I still can't find all my stuff. I can't find my box of wine, my wine from Kroger, and I can't find my wigs, y'all. I can't find my box with my wigs in it. I don't know where the movers put it, and so, it's just it's a little bit of trauma. It's first world trauma. Don't get me wrong, but it's a little bit of trauma. I want my wigs, and I would like my Boone's Farm and Arbor Mist, and I can't find it. So that's what I'm
Amber,
doing. What you doing? What you looking for?
for the folks who are listening to us and not watching us, I was playing my tiny violin because we know it's hard for Amber in these streets. We know, y'all, she's going through a lot. We don't have to set up the GoFundMe just yet, but I fear that it may come to that. But Amber, if you need your wine from Kroger, baby, I'm happy to Instacart you some wine from Kroger if you need it. Just let me know what you like, and I'm gonna send it over there. Okay?
I like that froze, the strawberry froze lemonade wine is $7.99. Got just enough alcohol to make me forget how many kids I got. That's my stuff. And I had just
Okay.
bought
Okay.
4 bottles, because when you know how you go to Kroger, you get the 6 and you get 10% off. So I bought 4 bottles of that and 2 bottles of Arbor Mist. And I can't find my box. I
I'm
can't.
sorry, Amber.
I'm
And
sorry.
also, I don't know about the wine at Kroger because I don't have a drinking problem, so I don't buy my alcohol in bulk like that. But you did ask me. You asked me, Amber, what I had been doing. So the brokers may or may not know, Erika just turned 45 in these streets.
Yes.
So she's rounding to 50 now. Oh my gosh. She's getting old, but still looking very good.
Still looking very good. Youthful in these
Mm-hmm.
streets.
But so when y'all see me, make room, help the old lady cross the street if y'all see me out in these streets. But Amber, since we're talking about heavy topics, I watched this documentary on Netflix the other day called Our Father. Have you seen that one?
Mm-mm.
Child, the fertility doctor who didn't put his
I
sperm
heard about
every
that. The
which
one
way.
that was using his sperm to have all the children.
Yes, child. Yes. So if you haven't seen that one, when you find your wine, don't watch this without wine. When you find your wine, go watch that one because it's a whole mess. It was like, yikes.
And didn't the girl find out on like ancestry.com or something? Like she found like a random brother?
I think it was 23andMe, I think it was. But as I was watching this documentary, Amber, it made me think about this abortion debate because there is some conjecture about this particular doctor and his affiliation with the Quiver Full folks.
Yes.
And those are, I think, the type of folks that we are going to be talking about today on the show.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Ooh.
But so straight from everything that's going on, I think everybody will catch you up a little bit. But a few weeks ago, Politico broke this story that the Supreme Court basically is, I guess, planning to, or there was this leaked opinion related to Roe v. Wade. And I think everybody also knows that Roe v. Wade is the seminal Supreme Court case protecting the right for a person to have an abortion. And for certain medical care. And then also just because sometimes that's the decision that people want to make, right? So in certain circumstances, that would be possible. I also want to stop for a second before we go on, Amber. So I know that you and I are aligned in this, but just to make sure. So we will do our best today as we're talking about abortion to not frame it just as a women's issue. Primarily, abortion is a women's issue, yes, but abortion can affect folks who are not women, people who have uteruses. So we want to try to be thoughtful about that. So after the show, if you find out we didn't do a good job with that or we made some mistakes, let us know. But that's where our intent is related to how we're going to frame and talk about this conversation, right?
Absolutely.
So yes. Okay. So that's abortion. That's Roe v. Wade. But there was so much of an uproar on some sides, celebration on other sides that this was happening. There were people talking about the leak, and some people were more concerned with the leak and the Supreme Court and what that meant versus what the justices were actually saying in the opinion. So all of these things are sort of swirling. And so we wanted to make sure that we gave Amber time so that she could dig in, as our favorite ratchet lawyer, and help us, the lay folks around here, to understand what's going on. So that's kind of like the foundational stuff.
So the first thing I want to say, because this opinion was, it's like 103 pages, and Erica and I were actually supposed to record this like a couple of days ago, and I was like, I'm not even done reading this trash, like, because I was reading it at night, but y'all, this is really happening, and not only is it really happening, but if I tell you Samuel Alito needs an Olympic gold medal for that intellectual legal jump he made. Child. Woo, woo, woo. So we're going to talk about that later. But anyway, I guess we can just sort of.
Yeah, it was a whole lot for you to try to consume. And so that's why some people were, I know people were probably in your DMs like, Amber, you got to say something, you got to talk in long form about this. And I know you just had to get your head on right about it. You had to take time to read everything. So that's kind of what's happening here. So this has been going on for several weeks now. By the time this airs, it will be several weeks, but we just want to make sure that we were able to cover it in the right way. But to kind of go back some more. So, y'all know Pew Research does a lot of different studies, and they did a study with about 41 countries. And according to this, the United States ranked last in its parental leave policies. I think most people know that, right?
Right.
A lot of people, if you have parental leave at all, maybe you get a couple of weeks, maybe you're covered by your disability insurance, maybe you get a few weeks, but it's, of course, we don't have parental leave at the federal level. So many folks are just struggling, right? So, and it was the only nation that offers no type of mandated parental leave for delivery or recovery. It's like, y'all just push these babies out, get them cut out, and you got to keep it moving. And in fact, over 120 companies around the world offer paid parental leave. And of course, ours does not. In addition to this, the United States ranks 30th in the world for overall access to healthcare. And we are lumped in with countries like Mexico, India, and Thailand, who actually fared better than we do. And you all know, probably just from being a citizen of this nation, that healthcare is a thing that can bankrupt you. Healthcare is a thing that can stress you the hell out, trying to jump behind and search after all these bills and where are they, and this doctor charged this for what. And it's a whole mess. So it's just really enlightening how we have this issue that's tied into our privacy and tied into our healthcare, and just helps to highlight the lack of a safety net and resources that we have in this nation. But on top of all of that, we know that structural racism, broken systems, come in and amplify these issues. And of course, that makes it worse for Black people, particularly Black women, other Black people who are giving birth and getting pregnant. So that's really where we want to put our focus for today. We know that this is not just a Black issue, of course, but that's just how we gonna, choose to talk about it. So Amber, I've rambled enough. Tell us about what happened before Roe v. Wade. How do we even get there?
Yeah, so it's really ironic that we sort of frame this as a pro-life issue in the backdrop of all those stats that you read about how much we clearly care about life, right? Because we tie healthcare to income in this country, to people's ability to labor. But it's also interesting to sort of look at that and see how the debate about abortion has evolved. Because the one good thing about the fact that we don't really learn nothing in school but propaganda is that people have a very short memory. And so our modern perception of abortion, our modern grappling with abortion as a moral, cultural issue is actually very recent to American history. Um, in the 18th century and even in the 17th century, abortion was widely available in the United States to women and birthing people. It was advertised in newspapers. Um, it was
Amber, I ain't never heard of this before. I ain't never heard of no advertisements at no point in history. Amber, what has happened?
in the classifieds, sis, in the classifieds. Like I swear, it's in the receipts.
Really?
It's in the receipts. Y'all can go look it up yourself. Don't even believe me. And you know what else is funny? Not only was it widely accepted, but in general, it was not a religious issue. The Catholic Church in America generally was supportive of abortion. The Baptist Church, Southern Baptist Church, um, there were
But the
funds.
evangelicals been telling me that this is the key issue that they interested in, though, Amber.
Mm,
That's what they said. They believe this forever. They said Jesus
mm,
told them.
well, that wasn't on the WWJD bracelet at first, because
Okay.
as early as the turn of the 20th century, Southern Baptist churches collected funds to help women who were victims of rape and incest have access to abortion. So you could actually go to the national convention on the national level and get assistance getting an abortion if you were the victim of rape or incest through the Southern Baptist Church. So, I mean, that was into the 20th century. And even when abortion became a hot topic issue in the United States, at the end of the 19th century, in 1880, when it first became outlawed, it was not a moral issue. It was a safety issue. The issue was the safety of the drugs that were being used to induce the abortion and the safety threat that it posed to women, because a lot of those drugs were not regulated and they were very dangerous. But as long as a woman was pre quickening, which is the term that they used in the 18th and 19th century to refer to like before you could feel the baby kick, you could absolutely get an abortion in the United States pretty much anywhere. And when it was outlawed initially, it was because the drugs were unsafe and it was not anything to do with the moral or the life of the baby. That did not become an issue until, surprise, anti-feminism rose up in the 1920s. And in direct response to feminism and the feminist movement, abortion became a part of the anti-feminist agenda through a Harvard physician. I cannot remember that man's name, but I'm gonna put it in the receipts. I believe it was Dr. Rosner. That was his name. He championed abortion and the bans on abortion as a part of an anti-feminist agenda to help put
You mean
women
that
in
he
their,
championed anti-abortion?
excuse me, anti-abortion measures,
Okay.
to help um, suppress feminism. This idea that women needed to be barefoot and pregnant and at home doing what their husbands told them, not in these streets trying to vote and work, because ain't nobody got time for that. Okay.
Okay.
So,
And just Amber, I'm here learning with the rest of the brokers, right? So, tell me, when you talk about how it was available and performed early on for instances of maybe the mother's health or rape or incest, do you know if at the time it was also acceptable just because it's my body and it's what I want to do, right? Like I don't have to have a story of rape or incest.
Now, usually for people who, like I mentioned earlier, were seeking to get assistance through religious organizations, it had to be tied to rape or incest. But if you look at, there is a book, and I'm gonna put the receipts in the notes for this episode. They have some ads from the 18th and 19th century, and it mentions nothing about the reasons. The only thing you were required to prove to the person performing the procedure is that you had not yet reached a stage of quickening. And that was even very subjective. Like, as long as you could say you had not yet felt the baby kicking or moving inside of you, you were able to get the procedure. It was not until the post feminist era, when we started having regulation on the state level, that this term viability became introduced into the political lexicon. And I will tell you, that is something that both scientists, doctors, and jurists, lawyers, all agree that what viability is has never been clearly determined. But that was not a part of the conversation about abortion, not neither viability nor the basis, for a very long time, a very long time.
Okay. So if we that was happening before Roe v. Wade. So one of the things that is new to me that I did not know is that Roe v. Wade has its roots here in Dallas, right? So we had Jane Roe, as opposed to John Doe. And that was the alias of Norma McCurvey. And she's a Dallas woman who became pregnant with her third child. Now, apparently, she had given birth to two other children, but she put them up for adoption. And so this time she was looking for an abortion. And Texas law at the time in 1969, they only allowed abortions to save the life of the mother. And so Norma decided that she wanted to sue Dallas County, the Dallas County District Attorney, who at the time was called Henry Wade. And she had the help of some other attorneys, Linda Coffey, Sarah Weddington, to try to get access to an immediate emergency abortion. And they denied her case.
Yep. And it's interesting because we all know the biology. You don't remain pregnant forever, right? And so usually when you have litigation working its way up to the Supreme Court, it takes years. So
Yeah.
obviously the reality of it is for most women, during the term of a healthy pregnancy, which is usually 40 to 41 weeks, that is never going to be enough time realistically for a case to start from inception and then work its way up to review in the Supreme Court. And so, what Norma McCurvey's attorneys decided to do was shift their focus from her individual litigation and convert the case to a class action. And the way that states had usually got around having abortion issues decided by the Supreme Court is, of course, because women and birthing people usually would have already had the baby by the time it got to the Supreme Court. They would argue that the issue was moot. So the Supreme Court, all courts in general, are not allowed to give like advisory opinions. It has to be an actual controversy or case. And so the way that cases would sort of die out with the issue of abortion and challenging abortion laws in the
Here's a
60s
baby.
is, this is moot, the baby here, so we can't talk about that. So what the Supreme Court did in the class action with Roe versus Wade is they said, that's really not fair to these litigants. Nobody's ever going to be pregnant long enough for a case to start and get to the Supreme Court. So we are going to have a special exception for situations where the case is what is called it evades review, but is capable of repetition, which means that the life cycle of the issue is so short that it evades Supreme Court review, but it's capable of happening again. So even though Norma McCurvey might have already had this baby, it's very possible that she might get pregnant again, or another person might get pregnant again. So we're going to create an
Question.
exception.
Oh, sorry. So you talk about there was this class that was created. So did the class have to have in it a set of members, like you said, people who are getting pregnant and then having a baby and getting, or is it just like you have these unnamed, not necessarily real people? Like, who was in the class?
So in the specific case, the class were people who were able to have babies. But the general exception applies to anything that is possible where you might evade review, but it's capable of repetition. So,
No, what I mean, did you have to have people who were currently pregnant being a part, like were people coming in and out of the
oh, no, no,
class
no.
is I
It's
guess what
called
I'm
a
asking.
putative class. It's called a putative class. So just for example, it the class isn't a group of real people with like real names, but basically Norma McCurby was a representative, a putative representative
Okay.
for anybody
Gotcha.
who might possibly be able
In the situation in
biologically
the
to
future.
find themselves in that situation. Yes. So
Okay.
like it's called a putative class, and that happens a lot, not just with pregnancy, but you'll find it a lot in like litigation involving like breeding. Like sometimes there's really expensive lawsuits that have to do with like the breeding of animals. But of course, again, it's biology. It doesn't happen and you don't stay pregnant until the lawsuit is over. So it's those kind of things that just by the nature of what they are, it's unlikely that it'll make it to the Supreme Court in time for it to be heard while the issue is still going on. So we're going to create sort of a putative class, which is like we're going to pretend, and anybody who could fall into that class is going to be covered by the ruling. And so that's basically what the court did. That's basically
Okay.
what the court did. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'm pregnant, so now I'm a part of it. No. And that's why the right is extended to women and birthing people now through the language. You don't have to be pregnant, but you are covered by the class if you have the possibility biologically to be pregnant, right? So the
So
court.
Amber, I've heard a lot. Oh, sorry.
No, no, go ahead, dear.
I was just gonna say I've heard a lot of people talking about the Constitution this and the Constitution that, and we know that the Constitution doesn't speak to abortion. So how does the Constitution play in all of this?
So it's very interesting that the constitutional right to abortion comes from the same place that your right to remain silent comes from. That's technically
Really?
not true. The right to remain silent is due process, so that's technically not true. But it comes from the right against unreasonable search and seizure, Fourth Amendment, which is like um, search warrants. The government can't just come inside your house and start searching it. State actors, they have to have either your permission, your consent, or a search warrant. And so if you
Okay.
look at the Fourth Amendment, it's interesting because the language of the Fourth Amendment specifically states, um, let me read it to y'all.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, girl, read it because I can't find it.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
Okay. So, what the court said basically in Roe is that implied in this language is a fundamental right for people to be free from the seizing of their body by the government without a reason. Okay. And so the court is basically saying if we have this freedom from government intrusion, implied in that or necessary to the ingredients in that is some level of privacy. Okay. So clearly, the Constitution must contemplate that individuals have some right to privacy that's so fundamental that the government can't just come barge in your house or search you or touch your body unless they have probable cause, right? And unless they have a warrant and permission to do that. And so that same fundamental right to privacy, the court decided in Roe versus Wade, is a right that is so fundamental as a constitutional building block that in order for it to be disturbed, the state has to have a compelling interest. And that is the highest constitutional test. So there's three. The lowest is rational basis, which just doesn't make sense. And then the highest is a compelling state interest. And so not only must the government have a compelling state interest before it disturbs a fundamental right, but even when the government disturbs that right, the court says that it has to be the least restrictive means available. So that means you got to cut that slice of the pie as small as possible to get done what you need to get done. So you got to be as narrow as you can possibly be to do what the government's objective is. And so here the court said, look, yes, the government has an objective in protecting life, but outright banning an abortion is too broad of a restriction. The more appropriate way to do that, because the government's interest in protecting life has to be balanced against the birthing person's right to privacy in their own body. And so an outright ban is too broad. What we're going to do is say that women and birthing people, up until the point of viability, have an unrestricted right to get an abortion that flows naturally and necessarily from that implied right to privacy that the Fourth Amendment is built upon. And so that's basically what the court held 7-2 in Roe versus Wade.
So, Amber, I'm trying to digest the things that you're saying as a layperson, and it seems like this is a pretty flimsy argument on which to build sort of a very major right of people to have. It just doesn't seem like this was ever going to stand the test of time. Um, and I don't know that I have a question here. I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to piece it together. And it just feels like this was not built. Roe v. Wade and this argument for it wasn't built on the strongest of foundations to protect it moving forward.
Yeah, no, I understand that when you sort of think about the the law in a outside of the context. And what is so interesting to me is that people like Clarence Thomas, who claim to be originalist, right? People like Samuel Alito, who wrote this, who claim to be originalist, with these, which means they are the type of lawyers who believe that in order for us to properly interpret and apply constitutional law, we not just have to look at the words on the paper, but we have to go back in time and look at the intention of the men who wrote it. Okay. So this is one of the few places where I actually think that argument works against them, because the whole origin of the founding of our country was this idea that they were resisting tyranny. They were resisting government overreach. They were resisting the idea that the government could control their person, could control how they practice their religion, could control the ways that they assemble together, could control access to private residences. And so the same men who believed that, who believed in that level of individual autonomy, these people who think we should look at what they intended say that must not include any level of privacy. Now that just don't
But
make
I
no
think
damn
that
sense.
makes But Amber, I think it does make sense, because if you go back to the original people who wrote the slave owning, many of them people who wrote this, they always had caveats for that. Like, this to me is another caveat, and this falls right in line with, I'm writing these things with the understanding of what I want them to include. And I don't want it to include Black people. I don't want it to include Indigenous people. I don't want it to include women. Like, so to me, this lines up really well.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What I'm saying is, I think that part of it does. But to pretend like because it's convenient, and perhaps we can expand the context so that maybe it makes more sense. So the right to privacy that has been construed and articulated by the Supreme Court has not just been used to rule for the right for a person to access abortion pre-viability, but that is also the legal reasoning used to ban laws that prohibit interracial marriages. Loving versus Virginia, which Roe versus Wade is the progeny, which that means it's a part of that line of cases. The same logic was used. This implied right to a personal autonomy, to a personal privacy that the government cannot take away and restrict. That is the same logic that was used to overturn laws that prohibited black and white people from marrying. Is also the same logic that was used to overturn cases that banned anal sex and sodomy laws. Like laws like that were the law in Texas that was in question in the case that the Supreme Court overturned. So I think when you expand the concept, this idea of personal freedom is very consistent with what they were talking about. Now, who we apply it to now is not who they had in mind. But this idea of personal freedom, I think, is very in line and very consistent with why the founders were writing what they were writing.
Right. And I just mean that I think in the history of America, it's
Yes,
always we're writing these laws and we want to apply them in certain ways to certain groups of people when it feels
facts.
good to us and right to us. So, of course, I'm not at all arguing with you. This is just seems like some old ordinary normal bullshit, right?
I
Like
mean,
they
facts,
just
facts, facts. No, I get that part of it. I just think that you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't tell us, oh, we need to look at the intent of the founders. And then when we look at the intent of the founders and we follow that intent, but in a broader application of to whom we're implying that intent, then you have a problem, right? When we are extending the umbrella of who's covered by that intent. Because that's what you're arguing with, not whether this is in line with the idea of a personal freedom or a personal autonomy. You just don't like the fact that there's more people who can stand under that umbrella and claim it now, other than the white
yeah.
men who were included when the document was first wrote, right? And so that's really the issue, you know.
Yeah. And um so I do want to Amber talk let me take two steps back. So, first of all, when this initially came out, I'd heard people talking about this is going to then move to contraception, right? This is going to move into interracial marriage. This is going to move into same-sex marriages. All of these things are now under attack. And a part of me wanted to be like, y'all always blowing shit out of proportion. Like y'all always taking stuff too far. But in the days after the leak, I've heard so many things from actual politicians, from actual lawmakers in states and at the federal level saying, no, that's exactly what we want to do. And I'm like, Amber, this stuff to me is now very scary. And things that I never thought we would call into question are now being called into question. And so please tell me what you think the ramifications could be if Roe v. Wade gets overturned.
So there is a principle in the law called stare decisis, and that is a Latin term for let it stand. And basically, what stare decisis is basically this concept that it's better for us to have certainty than it is for us to get it right. So, in general, we don't disturb the law unless it's just egregious, like slavery and enslavement was a part of stare decisis. Like Plessy versus Ferguson, the case that ruled that separate but equal was actually the law um, in the United States, was not overturned until 1959 when Brown versus Board of Education was ruled upon, right? Because it is very persuasive when you go to court. Like when I go to trial, I take precedent with me, right? The precedent, the
Yes.
previous rulings of the court to say, Your Honor, actually, in this circuit, in the Fifth Circuit, the law states this, and that is supposed to be binding on all the judges below. Um, and so for a lot of people, they just sort of assume that because of stare decisis, Roe was settled law. That is the politically correct answer that every single judge, whether appointed by a Republican or a Democrat, that's the answer that they give when they are being
They all
confronted.
sat in front of the Senate and said it, didn't they, Amber? They all sat in front
Samuel
of the Senate and said it.
Alito,
Okay,
Brad
just
Kavanaugh, Brent Kavanaugh sat in front of the Senate with the mouths that the Lord gave them and said, Roe is settled precedent.
and did
That
Amy do it too? Amy
um
did it too.
she said Roe was settled
Okay.
precedent. It was the law of the land.
Okay.
And she
Okay.
wasn't going to answer any more specific questions, but that she respects the law.
Okay.
So this is monumental for a lot of reasons. The fact that these judges are disturbing precedent, but not only precedent, but precedent that is so interconnected with so many other fields. Obergefell, the case that decided the right of same-sex couples to marry, cites Roe versus Wade. It is the same Fourth Amendment implied right to privacy. Okay, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the other case that talks about contraception. Like, so not only is this not an overstatement, but when you start chopping at the precedent that Roe is built on, there is a lot of stuff unrelated to the right to decide the circumstances under which you carry a child that are easily impacted. Marriage, regulation of the kind of sex you want to have in your bedroom when you are consenting, okay? The time, place, and manner that you can access contraceptives. Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, has gone on the record to say that she believes contraceptives should be illegal to everyone except heterosexual married couples.
Married people.
And I was like, ain't that backwards? Shouldn't it be available to the rest of us except them? Shouldn't they be out here being fruitful?
No,
and
because they don't
multiplying?
want y'all screwing. They don't want y'all screwing if y'all not married.
I'm just saying,
Okay?
like, that's so backwards. The
No.
people that's married need to be
They don't
fruitful
want
and
y'all screwing.
multiplying. Okay?
No.
Let me tell you something. They not taking my IUD. Okay? If I have to keep it up there myself, because they not. Child, please.
Amber, okay, let me say this. Related but unrelated. So the way that abortion gets talked about is, normally when people hear the word abortion, they're thinking, I'm going in because I've made a decision for whatever reason. And look, on Brokerage, we believe it's your damn right. You don't have to give nobody no excuse. You don't have to tell us a reason and none of that, right? But anyway, but there are instances where, like, maybe you're having an ectopic pregnancy, and so that you won't freaking die, right? You have to have what they might call a missed abortion, or that's the umbrella term that gets used for a lot of this. So, Amber, I can tell you, I had 2 miscarriages, right? And so one time it was one of those things where the doctor was like, do you want to wait around and you can wait and see if the baby just passes through your body and you're able to manage that and there's no problem? Is that what you want to do? And I just made a decision that it was already traumatic enough for me to have lost a viable pregnancy, or a pregnancy that I wanted, than for me to have to sit around for I don't know how long before the baby decided to move, right? And so I was like, no, I would like to have a DNC, but that gets captured under this umbrella of abortion, right? And so that was for my mental health, right? Physically, it probably would have been okay if it had happened naturally, but that was a decision that I made for myself because I didn't want that. The second time that it happened to me, again, I was at the time very excited to be pregnant, and I found out I was having a miscarriage the second time because I started to have contractions. And having had a baby before, I was like, these are contractions. I immediately drove to the doctor's office. I was like, things are not going to work out. I know what this feeling is. And so the doctor was like, okay, well, we'll schedule you for a few days out. Here's some medicine. The medicine didn't work. I was in literal labor, feeling awful, went to the emergency room and had to fight with the people about what was going on and all of these other things. And that process was active, and it was like having to give birth. And so again, from a mental health perspective and from a physical perspective, it's bad enough that you are losing the opportunity to have this child, but then for them to be like, well, just kind of sit back and watch it happen when that doesn't have to be the case.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just think, and again, that didn't have to be my reason. That just happened to be my reason. But the cruelty that
Yes.
exists
Yes.
for people who are just like, just go home and, figure it out. And having been on all fours in an emergency room, like I'm in full on labor and I really would love for y'all to help me out, is it's just something. And I think we just need to respect the full range of reasons why these things happen, but it's cruel to deny somebody this kind of health care no matter the situation. And I shouldn't have to have this story or these stories, and somebody shouldn't have to be like, well, y'all tied my health care to my job, and I don't happen to have one right now, and I don't have the means to take care of a child, or something happened with my partner, or whatever it is. I shouldn't have to give all these stories for people to have compassion for my reason for wanting to have an abortion. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I do want to make sure that we walk out of this show feeling like it doesn't matter what your reason is. It does not have to be a situation where you were raped by your stepfather for you to be able to have an abortion. Like it just
Absolutely. And I think the other side of the coin is there are women like me who, very early in my second pregnancy, I found out that I had a placenta previa, and I was placed on bed rest, but I couldn't stop working. I was the breadwinner in my family, and I continued to work, but I also continued to bleed. And the final time I hemorrhaged in the middle of a jury trial, and I was placed in the hospital for 6 weeks to try to keep myself pregnant. Um, and I was in antepartum, like at Baylor, working every day. Like I
yeah,
had to beg my job, like, please let me work, because I didn't
yeah,
want to take, I only had 12 weeks of maternity leave, which was short term disability. Okay. And I had already
yeah,
knew what that was like, because when I got pregnant with my daughter, I had just started working for the DA's office, and I wasn't eligible for FMLA by the time I got ready to deliver. So I was only able to take 4 weeks because that's all I could afford. That's all I had. 2 weeks of vacation, and I took 2 weeks of unpaid leave. And when I went back to work, my daughter was 4 weeks old, and I had to pay twice the tuition at the daycare because my baby wasn't fully vaccinated and she wasn't 6 weeks old. So the first time I
mm,
paid for daycare, when I went back to work the first time, it was my entire check as a government employee. It was literally my entire check.
yeah,
Okay. And that was hard, hard, hard. And so I didn't want to go through that again, the financial pressure. And so I just kept pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself. Um, but when I found out very early on that I had a placenta previa, the thought crossed my mind about, you know, did I want to continue? But I wanted my baby, but I was scared, because I was like, girl, it's April. This baby is due in October. I cannot work for 6 months. Like, we gotta eat,
right,
and I was foolish enough and crazy enough to just say, okay, well, I'm just going to keep working. But I did it and I almost died. And the fact that we are putting people in those kind of situations where it's like you have a medical professional telling you, listen, you need to go home and get your old black ass in the bed and stay in the bed till this baby come. And what I'm saying is tell that to the mortgage company, tell that
right.
to the light company, because I already have 2 kids and we have to eat. And you know what's so crazy? When I hemorrhaged the last time, I couldn't go on FMLA, but my ex husband at the time, I filled out the paperwork so he could go on FMLA and stay home with our kids because I was in the hospital. So I had to wake up every single day in the hospital and go to work and work and do everything but appear in court so that I could keep my benefits active for my kids. And the fact that we live in a nation that puts women in these crazy, untenable circumstances and force people to literally choose between almost dying and feeding their family, and then say, but we also want to restrict your access to basic family planning medical services. It is ridiculous. ridiculous. It is ridiculous that we put people in these situations. And we should be ashamed of ourselves to say we're doing that under the moniker of being pro life. Because we're not.
No, and we all know that
Yeah.
pro-life is a farce. Like we know that that's not a real issue. But that's why this abortion controversy debate situation has so many tentacles. It's connected to so many things within society. And it's easy to naively think, oh, that doesn't affect me. Like I'm out of this category of person, or I'm this age, or I'm whatever. And it's like, baby, I don't care who you are, right? I do not care who you are. This is affecting all of us. And I'm just afraid of the dominoes and how they're going to fall.
And if you have any doubt, I want to read to you all a portion of the opinion, because one of the things that shocked me when I read this opinion is that Samuel Alito not only said these words, he says, we hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one on which the defenders of Roe and Casey now chiefly rely, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. That provision has been held to guarantee some rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, but any such right must be deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition and implicit concept of ordered liberty. Now, the 14th Amendment, just to give you guys some context, is the amendment that applies the other 10 amendments, 1 through 10, including the fourth, to the states. So the 14th Amendment says that not only does the federal government have to abide by the liberties and the provisions and the constitutional protections afforded in the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments, but the 14th Amendment binds the states to that as well. So what he's basically saying is that the 14th Amendment does not bind abortion on the states. And one of the things that I found so egregious, in case you really think we might be stretching when we talk about the dominoes and the tentacles, is that Samuel Alito builds his argument on the writings of Sir Matthew Hale, who is a 13th century British legal scholar. He wrote a very
13th century? Damn,
girl.
we
He went back,
back that far?
went
Okay.
back. But
Okay.
Matthew Hale wrote a book called The History of the Pleasures of the Crown, and in that book, a lot of the fundamental components of American jurisprudence are built on it. The Pleasures of the Crown, excuse me, The Pleasures of the Crown. And he is, besides being the author of that book, most widely known for being the legal misogynist who decided that rape was a crime that should be rarely prosecuted because you should not believe women who report it, because women are prone to lies and women are prone to devious behavior. He also was the presiding judge over, we all know about the Salem witch trials, but Salem's predecessor that happened in Britain first, he is the judge that presided over those trials in Britain and sentenced two women to death as witches. And then his rulings were later used to justify the atrocity in Salem. And he is also known as a legal scholar who decided, based on his interpretation of the law, that as a matter of law, a husband could not rape his wife. And so
So
a
he was
lot.
evangelical.
Okay. And so a lot of the ways that rape is prosecuted as a crime here in the United States today, a lot of that jurisprudence is built on the crap that Sir Hale wrote. And the
But
fact
I thought
that,
they was trying to run away from Britain. How y'all trying to run away from Britain, but then build your legal system on everything British? Now I
right,
don't.
and there's no money you could give me to make me think that Samuel Alito doesn't know this about Matthew Hale. And so the fact that he spends pages of this opinion building legal arguments on concepts and principles championed by Matthew Hale, particularly in this context when it comes to abortion, an issue that primarily affects women, it is sick. It is sick. And they are trolling the hell out of us. Okay? They are trolling the hell out of us. And you will never make me believe they ain't.
But Amber, so I saw in a little bit of the opinion that Justice Alito was expressing his concern with the black babies, that he did not want to be a part of killing black babies. And so he wanted to make sure that a part of this is, the states can have the right to protect the black babies.
Yeah,
Can
till
you
they
talk
get
about
here.
that? Did you read that?
I did. And let me tell you, the evangelicals, the moral right, the moral majority, even though they ain't the majority no more, they love to conflate eugenics and abortion. Okay. Um, and so this is what I will say is that it is not only disingenuous, but it is outright factually inaccurate to conflate eugenics with abortion, because one has everything to do with the denial of autonomy, the denial of the right to choose the time, place, and manner under which a person brings a child into the world. It has everything to do with the medical racism that runs rampant in this country. A lot of the women who were victims of eugenics, they were lied to by their medical professionals, which is illegal. They were misinformed, and they were experimented on like they were science projects. That has nothing to do with a woman or a birthing person with the assistance of a medical professional deciding for whatever reason to voluntarily and with full knowledge and consent terminate a pregnancy. And the fact that they try to make that the same thing, that's some bull crap. Bull crap. Because a lot of the women who were victims of eugenics didn't even know. They didn't even know that they were being given hysterectomies. They didn't know that they were being given abortions. They didn't get to consent. They were being violated. And so the fact that they want to say, well, this is about black babies, no. Because if this was about black babies, y'all would make access to health care a priority. You would do the work to end the industrial prison complex in this country where 13% of us are black, but 33% of us are imprisoned. We imprison the largest percentage of our population of any other country in the world. So don't do that. Don't do that, because that's just not true.
It's Amber, I'm trying to find this quote kind of related to that. So there's a news article, and I'll have to tell y'all when I click it, I'll have to tell y'all where it's from. But the title is Texas Republicans say if Roe falls, they'll focus on adoptions and preventing women from seeking abortions elsewhere. And the quote is, we'll continue to do our best to make abortion not just outlawed, but unthinkable. So I'll have to tell you where this comes from, but they are going to be working night and day to make sure that people no longer have access to abortions, that they don't have access to Plan B, that people get prizes, that you win cars and prizes if you snitching on people who decide they want to try to get abortion drugs through the mail, who decide they want to take a trip across state lines to go get abortions. Child, they're going to be working very hard, and it is going to be very lucrative for certain members of society to make sure that people do not have access to abortions anymore or contraception.
And I want you guys to also remember that there is a risk management component to health insurance. Most doctors and medical professionals carry malpractice insurance. So the threat of litigation is going to drive up the cost for a whole segment of treatment that will disproportionately impact the cost of healthcare for women, because those costs are going to be passed on to the consumer, to the patient. Okay, a doctor who is reluctant to perform a procedure out of fear that a stranger can sue them for, because a lot of this legislation, I know I saw an article that said Louisiana is trying to figure out a way to propose legislation that would allow doctors that perform out of state abortions on Louisiana residents to be sued by that state. Even if the suits are going to be dismissed, even if they don't have any ground to stand on, that is going to be thrown into the pot of how do we manage this risk and how do we put a cost on it. And that is going to drive up the cost of medical care. And that is going to affect people who are already the most likely to not be getting the care they need. Because the people making these laws, they got bomb ass government insurance. Whatever they need, they can go get it. But it is the people at the bottom of the totem pole who are going to be most affected by this. Because when the cost of accepting Medicaid covers less of the actual cost, less doctors are going to take it. Okay? And so when you have to drive 100 miles to find a doctor that takes your crap ass insurance, are you really going to go to the doctor? Or does that increase the likelihood that you do what you heard your cousin did when she got pregnant that helped her end her pregnancy, but that puts your health at risk? So it's just, it's more than one thing. It's more than just, will you have to drive across state lines? This is going to drive up cost, and it is going to affect the most vulnerable among us.
It's absolutely going to affect the most vulnerable among us. And then I think about how people are going to just continue to be harmed, because I've also seen lots of articles about companies saying, we're going to pay for our employees to get abortions. We'll pay for our employees to travel. And first of all, I'm like, I don't trust y'all. So I already know some shenanigans are afoot. But for those companies that do that, then again, I'm more closely tethered to this organization. I have fewer ways that I can move, right? Because I'm like, well, damn, this company said I have access to certain healthcare. So let me be quiet. Let me do what they tell me to do. Let me not try to form a union. It's just like all of these things, then I become a more vulnerable employee.
Yeah, and then you still
And
gonna give money to the politicians passing these laws because you like their
that part.
positions on regulatory stuff. So don't fly me somewhere to get medical services and then give money to the person that is making it difficult for me to get the services to help them stay in office and continue to wreak havoc on my life. This shit is like a movie that just doesn't end.
Ciao. Ciao. It is, Amber. And that's why I am every day. I don't know if it's because I'm 45 and I'm old or what it is, but every day I'm just waiting on the curb, like, Jesus, come and get me. I'm here.
Yeah.
Just come by and pick me up, and if there's room, go get Amber. But
Yeah, but Lord,
she
help me find my wigs first, because I want to look cute in our great heavenly gathering in the New Jerusalem. Okay, unless I get a new head of
you
hair in
don't
heaven.
you don't think they have a wig closet in heaven?
Oh, but I'm gonna get new bundles in heaven. So never mind, God. You can come pick me up now, because I forgot. Let me read my word. I'm gonna get me some new bundles in
Right.
my glorified body. Come on, yes. Never mind, Jesus. You can come get me. I forgot. Yes, all
Wow.
things work
Remember,
together.
if there's room for Amber, we'll stop by. But Amber, just as we close out, I want people to start thinking about what what can we do? What should we be looking for? What should we be, listening for, just to make sure that we have an eye on this issue and the issues that fall out of it?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it looks like we are headed into a place where this is going to be a very state specific issue. And so, the best thing for all of us to do is to get informed so that we can know what the status of the laws are in our state. And so, the first part of homework today, we're going to put a link in the receipts where you will be able to go on a website and look up the status of the laws in your state and the extent to which your state offers access to abortion, the time limit where it's cut off, and you'll also be able to see that information about all the states in the United States, so you can look at places near you as well. But hop in the comments and let us know what the status of the laws are where you live, um, because in places like where we live in Texas, you know, we in
Yeah.
danger, like the prophetess Erica Badu says. So we want to make sure everybody is informed, because that is the most important thing right now, is knowing what your rights are and knowing what your access to healthcare is, so that you can be protected. And also, the most important thing for the brokers to know is that abortion is still legal in the United States. What was leaked to Politico was a draft opinion. If you have appointments set, do not cancel them. Do not let people mislead you and make you think that you are no longer allowed to go through with those appointments, that you do not have a right to access contraceptives, Plan Bs. Right now, Roe versus Wade is still the law of the land. So if it is your decision as a person to move forward with terminating an abortion or getting access to contraceptives, do not let the misinformation out in the media make you think that you cannot exercise that right. Because until this draft opinion becomes a formal opinion, Roe is still the law of the land, and you have the right to access abortion as medical care, contraceptives as medical care, condoms, all of it. So,
And I will also say that if there's anybody watching, anybody listening, and you are, I know all of the states have different laws related to this, right? But wherever you are, if you have an appointment or you want an appointment and you cannot pay for it, y'all come into our DMs. Like
please,
if you need money for an abortion, we will be happy to support you in that effort, because we believe that healthcare is a right. We believe that abortion is healthcare.
amen.
So, brokers, it is easy for some of us to say that abortion doesn't affect me because I don't have a uterus, or I have a uterus, but I'm old, or I really want to have kids. But we have to stay focused on these larger societal issues that are at hand. And we cannot sit idly by as the government seeks to overreach into issues of our own personal health and safety. Abortion is a multifaceted issue, and a person shouldn't have to recount a terrible story of rape or threat of death before the right is afforded to them. We have to organize and fight like hell against this slippery slope, because they are not going to stop here. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.